alive, and some other people maintain that he didn't, but they just don't know. They're not 100% sure who Albert really was. I mean, they gave him the name Albert, but that wasn't, they don't think that was his real name. And but then he and his mother left this hospital for a job there shortly after they were doing the research, so they never really were. But yeah, you Google it sometimes. Whatever happened to little Albert, you'll see a whole lot of stuff on there. I don't know that it's so important as it is the fact that they didn't do anything to help him with his fear. So one of his contemporaries, Mary Cover Jones, comes along, and she works with a little boy that had a fear of rabbits, and his name was Peter. It's kind of coincidental, but it's still Peter the rabbit. So Peter had this fear of rabbits, just like Albert had a fear of white rats. And what she did to help Peter out was she said, I wonder what would happen if I started exposing Peter to rabbits, but at a very low level. So she puts Peter in his room. He's eating cookies. She gives him cookies to eat, which makes him feel good. And she enters the room at the other end, so maybe 20, 30 feet away, with his rabbit. And Albert takes note of the rabbit, takes notice of the rabbit, but doesn't really do anything in particular. And he's eating his cookies. And she starts getting closer, very slowly getting closer and petting the rabbit. And he's, but he's eating his cookies. So she just keeps doing that over time, getting closer until finally here he is, and she's got the rabbit. And then finally puts the rabbit there, and he touches the rabbit, and everything's fine. Now he's not afraid of rabbits anymore. She was actually the first behavior therapist, I think we could say, Mary Cover Jones. And she used something called counter-conditioning. Counter-conditioning. Counter-conditioning is when you replace the US with another US that results in a UR that's incompatible with the first UR. So if fear is the first UR, you want to replace that with another response that's incompatible with it. You can't be happy and sad at the same time. You can't be fearful and relaxed at the same time. And so what she did was the cookies served as the US that made him feel good, that was incompatible with the fear. And when she did that, using this counter-conditioning, then he got over his fear of the rabbit. Any questions about that? Did you develop a fear of anything? I mean, could I make you afraid of that doorknob over there, Probably.
If you kind of keep to it, like every time you get it, yeah.
Well, it would be more difficult, though, than with animate objects. I think your book mentions another researcher named Bill Graveman that tried to replicate his study, but used inanimate objects like blocks and other things like that, and had trouble developing, causing people to become afraid of these inanimate objects. So it seems like we're biologically prepared to learn to make conditioned emotional responses with animate objects. Like, in fact, there's some studies that seem to indicate that we may be biologically predisposed to have a natural fear of spiders and snakes. And there's actually some research on this. Probably because it was adaptive for us, a long time ago. Another thing with regard to the ease of conditioning, what they found out in rhesus monkeys, it's not in your book, but they present this monster to these rhesus monkeys, and the monster consists of a little mechanical robot thing that has lights, and it's real scary for a little monkey. And what they noticed was that if these monkeys had some previous training where they had control over their environment, they developed a fear response to the robot less quickly if they had some previous experience with having mastery over their world versus monkeys that didn't. So there's all kinds of factors that figure into these conditioned emotional responses. I think it goes beyond what we need to do in here, but there are a lot of different things that do affect whether you'll develop a phobia. Because some people experience these traumatic events in the presence of certain neutral stimuli, and they never develop any kind of phobia. Other people, one trial, and there you go. My aunt, for example, would never get on an airplane in her entire life. Never got on an airplane. She's definitely afraid of airplanes. Oh, so she got on an airplane, and it was really bumpy and scared the heck out of her, and so now she's avoiding it? Nope, was never never on an airplane. My guess is probably she sat there in front of the television watching all these airplane crashes and listening to stories from other people, and may have developed a classically conditioned fear, a phobia of airplanes, just simply based on observational learning, which is another factor that can be involved. You don't actually have to experience the thing directly to develop a phobia. And you may experience it directly and not develop a phobia. Most people don't, by the way, develop phobias when they have a traumatic experience. Well, anyway, so John Watson, Mary Cover Jones, and what else do we need to talk about? All right, so out of Mary Cover Jones' work comes something called systematic desensitization. Systematic desensitization. This is the work of a guy named John Wolpe, and what he did was, he said, you know, I think systematic desensitization. This is discussed on page
185. 185.
Yeah, 185. So what he did was, he said, no, I think I can use what Mary Cover Jones was doing, plus I think I can teach people what it feels like to be relaxed. So he used a deep relaxation technique developed by a guy named Jacobson. So the first thing he does is he has people learn how to be relaxed. Okay, your arms are very heavy. Your legs are very heavy. You're very relaxed. You are relaxed. Your feet are very heavy. It's basically going through. It's a little bit like it's a little bit like a hypnotic induction. Your eyelids are very heavy, heavier and heavier. Your legs are very heavy, heavier and heavier. I don't want to go through the whole thing because I had a professor, my advisor one time. He was demonstrating this, going through this protocol in an intro class. It was at night, and I was over in the office grading papers, and he calls me up and says, "Get over here right away to my classroom." And I'm okay. It was like 10 o'clock at night. Everybody's gone, but there's one student sitting in the middle of one of these classrooms on the, like 101 or whatever it is. And this girl was just sitting there like this. I said, "What in the world's going on?" He said, "Well, I went through this relaxation technique, and I was talking about hypnosis, and there she sitting." I said, "Oh my God!" He said, "Quick, call one of the clinicians that uses hypnosis. Get him over here. We got to get her out of this thing." So anyway, we called him, and he came over and brought her out of this the trance, the hypnotic state. But anyhow, I just thought that was just priceless, So, anyway, systematic desensitization. So he goes through this relaxation technique, and then he also has the subject or the client develop a hierarchy of fears from the things that make you least afraid to the things that make you most afraid. In the case of, well, I knew one of my colleagues, I think he probably had a phobic reaction or a phobia of elevators. Because one time, whenever we come into the building, I'd be involved in a conversation with him, and and really involved in this conversation. The elevator doors are opening right there. All we got to do is step in the elevator, and he would avoid the elevator. And at first I thought, well, he's one of these health nuts, I have to walk up 3 flights of stairs, it's going to keep me from dying. Which, by the way, it probably won't. I mean, there's the Hayflick limit. Your cells are only going to reproduce so many times, Anyway, so I never could get him to get in the elevator. And I thought, he's got this phobic reaction. Now, how could we help him with this reaction to the elevator? First, teach him deep relaxation. Then, develop a hierarchy of fears. And so maybe what he would put on there is his greatest fear would be inside the elevator with the doors closing. I just can't stand it, And what would be a very low-level fear-inducing experience, maybe?
Have him on the outside of the elevator watching.
How about outside the building?
Oh, okay.
Just walking into the building. And then, progressively, as he's getting closer and closer to the building, he's getting more excited, right? More nervous. So then, what Wolpe did initially was he used their imagination in this what we call systematic desensitization. So he systematically desensitizes them to the fear-inducing stimulus, the US, after they've learned how to feel relaxed. But he had people imagine these things originally. So he would say, all right, you're in his office, and he'd say, all right, I want you to imagine walking into the building, but I want you to tell me when you first start feeling anxious. Okay, imagine you're walking in the building. You got that image? Yes, okay. All right, you're walking down the hall toward the elevator. Are you okay? I'm feeling a little bit anxious. All right, stop. Take a deep breath. Your arms are very heavy. You're relaxed. Okay, yes. All right, let's walk a little further toward the door. Okay, so he would do that until finally they're imagining themselves getting in the elevator. They're completely relaxed. The elevator doors close. The elevator goes on with their way, and bing, they're cured. Let's analyze this in terms of classical conditioning. Extinction is involved here. They're imagining the elevator, and they're getting closer and closer to the elevator, but the fear is never there because the loud noise or the banging of the elevator is not there. And so as they get closer and closer to the elevator, finally they get in the elevator and they realize, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. And so the fear extinguishes. That's it. The fear extinguishes. You've got this relationship with somebody, and it's a very romantic relationship. So you go over to the cafeteria, and guess what? There they are, sitting next to somebody a little too close that you wish they weren't sitting next to. And so you're out of there, okay? The next day, hey, let's go to the cafeteria and get a cup of coffee. No, I'd rather not. Fine, I'm going to go over to the other place now and get some coffee. Nah, come on, let's go. So now you're avoiding that place. You don't want to go in there because you saw them in there. Loud noise caused fear. They're in there with that other person, and they caused a lot of fear and anxiety, and so now you're avoiding the cafeteria altogether, which is that fear-inducing place and anxiety. Well, so then you avoid it a lot. You avoid it a lot because you don't want to get exposed to this. Now, how can we help you with that? Get you to gradually introduce you back into the cafeteria until you discover that the U.S. He's not in there anymore with that other person. The fear disappears, it extinguishes, and there you go. And maybe you could use a little counter conditioning as well. So while you're walking over to the cafeteria, you could be telling jokes and making them feel good. Oh, I really like this cafeteria. And so you're inducing a good feeling, counter conditioning, while you get in there, extinction. And then you're okay with the cafeteria again. Otherwise, you're probably going to be avoiding that cafeteria for a while. Relatively resistant to extinction, avoidance responses. There you go. Now you can help your friend or yourself. Bowlby originally had people imagining these situations. Later on, they tried it with what they call in vitro applications, which is to say in the real life, where I would have you actually go over by the cafeteria, or I'd have my friend actually get in the elevator. But you do it very gradually. You introduce them to the elevator very gradually. They get on the elevator. Of course, the elevator has to run smoothly. If it runs smoothly, then it's extinguished. If they get in the elevator and that thing stops mid-floor, now you really got a problem. Anyway, that's called systematic desensitization. In vivo, which means which would mean using your imagination, not really, and in vitro, which would be out there. Okay. What else? There's another method you could use called flooding. Page 184, I guess it is. Flooding. There's another way that you can help your friend on the elevator. Tie him up, throw him in the elevator, and let it go. And after about 10 minutes, okay. Take the handcuffs off, you're cured. That's called flooding. It's also known as implosion therapy. because it's called flooding because of this strong inward flooding of emotions, or implosion therapy, this strong implosion of these feelings that you have, which then extinguish relatively quickly. But you don't want to do that when somebody's got like a heart condition or something, or do some kind of really intense anxiety associated with it. There's other ways of doing it too. There's persistent modeling. There's lots of different ways of doing it. Like with the rabbit thing. In addition to eating your cookies, you pet the rabbit in front of Al, in front of Peter, and then maybe you have Peter put his hand on your hand while you're petting the rabbit, and then maybe you have Peter take his hand and touch the rabbit, and put your hand on his hand. See, it's okay, see? And then take your hand away, and then there you are petting your rabbit. See, very gradually. Lots of different ways you could apply this, but flooding, systematic desensitization, counter conditioning, ways of extinguishing these classically conditioned emotional responses. All right, let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. Go ahead and get a drink of water, get a bag of chips, get whatever you want. We'll come back in 10 minutes and then we'll finish up this chapter and get started on Guston. So the last thing that we need to cover is this application of the classical conditioning to medicine. And so this is an area where classical conditioning has really been found a niche in behavioral medicine and biomedicine. What happened was there's a well-known study they mentioned in the book here by a couple of researchers, Ader and Cohen. And it was discovered many years ago, as you read in the book here, that there was a couple of researchers that discovered that if you injected organisms with some foreign proteins, then they could develop a classically conditioned immune response to their immune response would be ratcheted up to some neutral stimuli, like tactile stimuli. Then you inject them with some foreign protein, and then you get an immune response. But those early studies weren't that clear. Okay, so then that brings us forward to Ader and Cohen, who were interested in conditioned taste aversion learning, as we just talked about earlier, and they were actually looking for just some conditioned taste aversion learning. But rather than use, for example, being sick or electric shock, they injected organisms with a chemical called cyclophosphamide, which is an immunosuppressant drug. But they didn't really realize that at the time, because cyclophosphamide, this drug, also makes you sick. So they thought, well, let's do some conditioned taste aversion learning. And first, they exposed these rodents to saccharin water, just like we have been talking about with Garcia. But instead of irradiating them and then seeing where they would drink out of the trough, what they did is they injected them with this cyclophosphamide, which made them sick. So they were thinking they were going to get the same kind of, classically conditioned taste aversion. You have them drink sweet tasting water, and then you give them a shot of cyclophosphamide, they get sick, and then after a while they're going to avoid the saccharin water because they're making a connection between being sick and the saccharin water. But what they didn't realize is that cyclophosphamide is also a strong immunosuppressant. And they didn't know that. So they're going through their experimental protocol, and then after so many pairings of the saccharin water and the cyclophosphamide, they noticed some of the animals started dying. And they're thinking, well, now they should have learned, or we expected them to learn an aversion to the sweet tasting water, but we didn't expect them to die. Why are they dying? So they start taking a closer look, and then they figure out that cyclophosphamide is a strong immunosuppressant drug. And so what these rats were doing is they were dying from opportunistic diseases. They give them the sweet tasting water, they give them the cyclophosphamide that suppresses their immune system, so that later on in the testing phase, when they're drinking the sweet water, their immune system's they're not only are they getting sick, but they're avoiding the sweet tasting water, but their immune systems are being suppressed when they drink the saccharin water. And so what they discovered was actually classically conditioned immunosuppression. So you can actually cause your immune system to learn a classically conditioned response. Wait a minute, what? No central nervous system involved mean we don't have to be consciously aware of it? No, your body can learn classically conditioned responses and even automatic response systems like the immune system. Oh, so you mean that I could actually learn to become sick? Yes. You mean I could actually learn to become well? Yes. Also, they did studies with adrenaline. Adrenaline causes an increase in certain cells in your body that aid your immune system. And what they discovered was that you can develop a classically conditioned response where your immune system actually ratchets itself up. So it works both ways. Now you say to yourself, well, yeah, but if I can take a drug, if I need to suppress my immune system, for example, in cases that involve autoimmune disorders like lupus erythematosus, where your body literally attacks itself, your immune system is ratcheted up to the point where it attacks itself, lupus, and there's other diseases like that as well. And so then, well, so you mean you could learn a classically conditioned response to some external stimulus, which would then cause your immune system to slow down? Yes. But then you say, well, why not just take a drug then? I mean, if there's a drug that will suppress your immune system, if you've got an immune system that's overactive, like in an autoimmune disorder, why not just take the drug? Well, in many cases, drugs have lots of negative side effects. So if you can actually learn this kind of a response, or if for some reason you can't take that drug because you're allergic to it, or because of these really strong side effects, then maybe this would be another route that you could explore. And you've seen these commercials with, you know, like, take this brand X. It'll help you with whatever. Oh, but don't take this if you're pregnant. Don't take this without a doctor's prescription. If you experience any of the following, headache, dizziness, laughing spells, heart attack, even death, stop taking it. It's like, you ever see that now, these drugs? There's like a grocery list of 20 things, some of which include death. Oh yeah, I want that. I want that treatment. That's going to help me. Most drugs do have side effects, negative side effects, and so this may be an alternative for that kind of thing. But so there's two things that are important, I think, about Hader and Cohen's work. One is that they demonstrated that your body can actually learn to either get sick or to get better, and that there could be some classical conditioning involved in it. But it does involve a pairing of a neutral stimulus with that drug that has the effect. I don't want to mean to imply that, oh, so you mean I can learn to become healthy, like just sit there and smile all day long and I'll become healthy? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in their study, that neutral stimulus, the saccharin water, was paired with a drug that brought about those effects. Later on, you may not need to take that drug. You can just present the neutral stimulus, and then you'll get the same effect. But it's not just a matter of think yourself well. No, that's not it. Well, we make strong connections like that all the time. There's something called the medicine effect. Have you ever been sick, and then after you've gotten over that flu and you haven't eaten for a few days, and all of a sudden, you eat that saltine cracker, and it's like, oh, this tastes so good, this saltine cracker. Yeah, and then pretty soon that saltine cracker gets associated with feeling good and feeling well. And next time, I don't feel so good, I think I'll have a saltine cracker. And then maybe that will have some effect on you. With me, I got over the flu one time, and it happened to be egg foo young. I had some egg foo young, and it just tasted so good. Now, when I want to feel good, I go eat egg foo young. It's just like, this is just so good, because it got associated with feeling good. They call that the medicine effect. This has other applications as well. What they've done in some cases in the hospital, people that take chemo, get chemo, makes you sick, suppresses your appetite. You can't keep anything down, so that's a problem. If you're getting chemo, you still need to keep your nourishment up, but you can't eat. So what they did is they said, well, let's try this. I know. Right before somebody gets chemo that makes them feel sick, we give them a strong, distinct flavored food. It happened to be root beer candy. They give them root beer candy, which is this strong tasting substance, which is then associated with the chemo that makes you sick, and the feeling sick gets associated with the root beer candy. Then they can eat a regular meal, and it doesn't bother them as much, because now feeling sick is associated with root beer candy. And this hamburger is not root beer, so it's okay. I mean, I don't know what's going through your mind, but I'm just saying that has been shown to be somewhat effective. is pair being sick with a distinct flavor so that it doesn't interfere with you eating more nutritious food. Pretty interesting application. So, in any event, your body, what I find most interesting, I think, theoretically, is the fact that your body can learn these effects. Also, these classical conditioning and these ideas have also been used to, been involved with the placebo effect, to explain the placebo effect. People talk about, well, placebo is like a control group in a drug study. Placebo doesn't have any effect on you. Yes, it does. The placebo effect is a real effect. A placebo effect may actually bring about a certain response in you and can trigger certain kinds of biological responses in you. So placebo is not a completely neutral event. Usually the acid test for a drug, whether it's effective or not, is to compare it against a placebo effect. If a drug is actually more effective than just the effect due to a placebo, because if I tell you, you're sick, I'm really sick, and there's nothing I can give for it, I say, here's a pill for you, placebo. That means I will please. Here's a pill for you. It's really strong. I want you to take one of these. Do not take two. This is really strong. Okay? I don't give it to too many people. Oh, thanks. Oh, I feel better already. Yeah, your body actually may bring about certain changes in response to this pill. So usually the test for a drug is that whether it is more effective than a placebo. Because if it's not, then don't take the drug because of the negative side effects. Anyway, classical conditioning is applied to medicine, and so some interesting sort of applications here, I think. And the fact that your body can learn these classically conditioned responses. You can actually learn to break out in hives to your mother-in-law. Yes, this is true. There are people that can learn through this kind of conditioning, classical conditioning, allergic responses to plastic flowers. If you're allergic to pollen and a certain kind of flower, and I pair a plastic flower with that, the being sick, where I show you a rose and you break out all over the place, and now I hand you a plastic rose. Now you're breaking out. There's no pollen there. It's a classically conditioned response to this neutral stimulus. Same thing with your mother-in-law. They've done other studies too, where, for example, you might take something and burn somebody's skin and touch them with a piece of chalk over and over again. Okay, now what we do is touch you with a piece of chalk, and here comes a little blister. Yeah, your body can respond that way to these kinds of experiences. Anyhow. All right, any questions about that? Pavlov on education. What is you might guess? Anything that involves a conditioning of emotional responses is we're talking classical conditioning, and that can happen in a lot of contexts. Seems to happen. We talked about Maurer, didn't we? O.H. Maurer and his classically conditioned explanation of emotional responding everywhere in life. Did we not talk about that? It's not in your book. You don't need to know it for the test, but you might find it interesting. There's this guy, O.H. Maurer. He comes along and says, you know what, I think all learning involves classical conditioning of emotions. We didn't talk about this? Yeah, we did. Yeah, thank you. So any kind of emotional learning, which may be all over the place, involves classical conditioning. I think I went through the example of prejudices and also feelings associated with like the Olympics, and we talked about all that too, didn't we? Yeah, right. So classical conditioning is happening, and in education. Yeah, you've got that child that comes to college now. First time somebody writes the symbol pi on the board, or puts two expressions or parentheses around it and goes, I can't do algebra. I don't know algebra. No, I can't do it. It's not just I can't do it. It's, it's that. Numbers, no, please, no. Why? How'd that come about? Well, probably they were learning math in elementary school, and some teacher, you're stupid, how many times do I have to put this up here? What are you, retarded or something? I don't know, why don't students raise their hand more often when I ask questions in class? Some students do, some don't. Some never want to raise their hand. I ask a question, I see some students do this. How can you call on me? I don't even have eye contact with you. You know, hey, you in the green top. I know this guy. He's going to embarrass me. I know. Classical condition responses, yeah, you know, in school. Well, if I had a nickel for every student that told me, I can't do math, I just don't do math, I can't do math. Sure you can. You have a brain to do math, trust me. You know. Well, but not if you got these little classically conditioned things in the way. You know. Got to get past that first. Okay. Any questions about Pavlov? We'll finish with Pavlov. Let me introduce Guthrie to you, and we'll finish him up next week, then we'll review for the test. Edwin Guthrie, interesting guy. He's the consummate contiguity theorist. So now we've been talking contiguity theory, right? Pavlov, the close pairing and two stimuli, contiguity. Now, Guthrie is the consummate. He's like the premier contiguity theorist. Except that he is a contiguity theorist with voluntary responses, not automatic reflexive responses. This is what his model looks like. His theoretical paradigm looks like this. Well, there's that S and that R. That's our learning, but contiguity, straight contiguity. That's it. That's it. There's Guthrie. We're done. This is a stimulus. This is a voluntary response, meaning not reflexive. That's it. He says the last thing you did in the presence of this stimulus is what you're going to do the next time the stimulus is there. And these two things get connected on one trial. That's it. One trial learning. Whatever you did most recently in the presence of this stimulus is what you're going to do the next time the stimulus is there. And that's called his recency principle. That is it. That's his whole theoretical model. It's called the recency principle. Whatever you did most recently in a particular situation is what you're going to do the next time you're in that situation. Oh, you mean if you got rewarded for it? Forget all that. Forget reward, forget punishment, any of those notions at all. It's just whatever you did most recently is what you're going to do the next time you're in that situation. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like habit? The concept of a habit. Yeah, but it doesn't even involve any kind of consequences or reinforcers or US's or anything else. It's just whatever you did most recently in that situation is what you're going to do the next time you're in it. That's it. And we all have our own little idiosyncratic ways of doing things. He only did one experiment. You know, God, wouldn't it be great if I could only have to do one experiment and then my career is made? That's it. He only did one experiment with a guy named Horton, the Guthrie-Horton experiment. And what he did was they took these cats and they put them in this box. And to get out of the box, there was a pole sticking up in the middle of the box. So here's this box. Here's a pole in the middle of the box. And the pole can be moved in any direction. And if the pole was moved, a door opened up, they can get out of the box. But the pole can be tilted anyway. In here, all we got to do is bump into the pole, and they're out. So, anyway, they got a lot of different cats, and they put them in this box. And they noticed that maybe cat number 1 maybe would push the pole this way and get out. Maybe cat number 26 would push the pole that way and get out. Now here's the interesting thing. What they noticed was that on each subsequent trial, each cat developed its own idiosyncratic way of pressing on the pole. Cat number 1, if it pressed the pole this way to get out, every subsequent trial it pushed the pole this way to get out. Cat number 26, if it pushed the pole this way, first time, that's how it pressed the pole every other subsequent time to get out. And so he started saying, yeah. So you mean we all make these different responses? It only depends on what you did last time you were in that situation, and we all develop our own idiosyncratic ways of responding to the world. Yes. Oh, so you mean you can learn incorrect responses as easily as correct ones? Yes. Will you keep repeating those same dumb mistakes over and over again?
Yeah.
Yes. Until you replace it with another response. That's exactly right. Now, what I wanted to show you was, I've got a videotape here of back in the bad old days when I first started teaching. You know, I think that relatively new professors, I think that they, well, at least it was true with me, kind of sometimes decide that they have to impress you with, work you to death in how much they know. And so anyhow, that was me. And so when I first started teaching this class, it was, oh my God, the tests, they have 50 multiple choice items, 20 matching, short answer definitions, true, false. It was, this test was like, you know. And every student had to do a project on top of all that and write a paper and present it. Of course, I didn't have 60 students in a class either. You know, I'd have like 25 students. Now we have 60. Whatever the room holds, that's what you get. And which is okay, except that I can't do all this good stuff. Well, so then I started smartening up and decided, you know what, I don't think I need the I don't think I need the matching items. I don't think I need the short answer. Hey, you know what? I think I can go with 40 multiple choice questions, and you know, in the sampling, I believe that the results were pretty much the same. I could probably get away with 20 items. Would probably be enough of a sample to figure out who knows what. But 40, don't ask me why 40, but that's where we are. So this one student did a project based on Guthrie and videotaped it, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to just show it to you, and then we can talk about it after you watch it. So this is the Guthrie experiment that a student did one time here. Just to set it up, what this student did is she had intro psych students come in, and she gave them a deck of cards. Have you ever built card houses? Well, you know, when you were a kid, and some of you have anyway, a card house is you take the playing cards and you just like stack them up like this and build yourself a little house, you know. How many of you have ever done that? You know, this is back before there were video games and everything. We used to sit around as kids building card houses, you know, use our brain a little bit, but no, but anyway. So she had these students come in and build the card houses and videotape them. Now let's see let's watch and see what happens here. I got to fire this thing up again. I think he's going to find it pretty interesting. So the recency principle with Guthrie. If you play an instrument, you're probably going to erect a shrine to Guthrie. Because if you play an instrument, you know when you're learning a piece, if you make a mistake, you're going to keep making that mistake over and over unless you stop and replace it with other responses. And whenever you're going through this piece of music, and you get to that spot, here it comes. I just guarantee it. It's a rare musician that can make that mistake, learn it from the beginning, and then just catch it and correct it on the fly. But it's not unexplainable. I mean, there's a lot of connections made along the way. And those connections lead one to the next, and so on, with little muscular movements. And here they come, you know, unless you stop and rehearse it over and over again with the correct response. If you don't do that, you're going to keep doing that over and over again. All right. What do I need? A DVD? No. Can someone turn off the lights so we can see this? Wait a minute, I want to make sure it's leaving on the. Okay. Now watch her build this card house. Watch exactly how she builds this card house. All she did was say, here, sit down, build a card house. Any way you want, just build a card house.
And then,
She's doing it now, second time. Watch how she builds this card house. Every single movement is identical to the first time. You think she said, well, I'll try a different house, or I'll try something different. Every single movement is exactly the same. First she goes over here, then she goes over there, now she got these two cards left. One goes in the front, the other one goes on the side. That is not an instant replay, that is her doing it twice in a row. Now, different subject, watch this. Watch how she builds her card house. People are probably your parents. 50 years old now. Well, watch how she's doing this. Now she just kept going to the right. She did not like go to the right and then go to the left. And she just keeps going to the right. It just, I saw this videotape when she made it, and it was just like Guthrie in action. Now you think, okay, that fell down. Let's try something different. It's interesting how on the card there she just put down, she always put it just a little too close where it's almost falling over. She didn't even try to correct that a little bit. Anyway, it's just more of the same, but it is, I mean, it's just uncanny. They build the card houses exactly the same way every single time without any kind of variation. Just like Guthrie's cat present on the pole in their own idiosyncratic ways. Okay, I think we've seen enough. Yeah, I just, anyway, kind of an interesting thing there. So his idea is based on this recency principle. But there's something else. There's a little more to it than that, because I said, you'll learn on one trial. You'll learn on one trial. Now you're saying to yourself, wait a second, you mean to tell me like learning to play the piano, you learn that on one trial? No. He makes a distinction between movements and acts and skills, and that there are three different levels of learning. Movements refer to little muscular movements. That's what he says gets learned on one try. A little muscular movement, a little muscular twitch, that gets connected to a stimulus on one try. Acts are made up of lots of little movements, and skills are made up of lots of acts. So you're not, unfortunately, going to learn how to play the piano on your first lesson. That's not going to happen. But what is it when you learn how to play the piano, for example? Well, you got these little black keys and these white keys, and you got to press them down, and you press them down in relation to some little black dots on a piece of paper. And what do? You learn to like move this finger up and down when you see a particular little black dot on a piece of paper. That gets learned on one try. If you press this finger down, which is maybe the wrong one, on a different note when you see this particular little black dot, you're going to keep doing that over and over again later on. But an act might be learning to play a particular piece of music. A skill would be learning to play the piano, where I can play lots of different pieces of music on a piano. That's a skill. Or an act, I learn a particular piece of music, but then the movements are the individual little muscular movements in association with these little black dots on a piece of paper. I'm talking about musical notes. So my daughter wanted to learn how to play the piano, and she said, well, teach me to play the piano. And she was younger, and I said, well, first of all, I wanted nothing to do with it, but I said, well, okay, I could, but I think you should take some lessons. And she said, no, you teach me. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, how many years you got? How many years you want to invest in it? And she goes, no, you can teach me. And then, of course, my wife goes, you can teach her to play the piano. Come on, you can teach her to play something. I'm like, no, not unless you want to start from the beginning and go to the end. And by the way, learning to play something like the piano or any instrument, it's a lifelong process. It's a process. You don't take lessons and, now I can play the piano. No, it's a process. And you get better and better over time. How much time you got? That's what it amounts to. And so anyway, it was a disaster because, of course, she wanted me to show her how to play Ode to Joy or something, and we got 30 minutes, some Beethoven or something. It's just like, please, no, don't make me do this. And so anyhow, I still take lessons myself. I've been taking lessons pretty much my whole life. I try to play classical organ, and I still study now, even today. And it's a lifelong thing. You don't ever arrive. It's just a journey. You keep going, your whole life. And people sometimes are like, wow, that's so neat. You still take lessons? It's like, yes. Guess what? There are people better than me out there that have something to offer. Yes. But in any event. And then other people sometimes hear me play and they go, oh, wow. Like I learned this in a half an hour. They don't see the, 35, 40 years of practice that went before it, and they think, oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, well, you do 40 years of this, you'll be able to do the same thing, But what gets learned on that one trial is that little muscular movement. In fact, the cognitive psychologists, they criticize this kind of behavioristic approach to learning, and what they said is that the behaviorist types, that what we have is a psychology of twitches. That's what they said. That we learn little muscular twitches. And the cognitive types, and then what the behaviorist types would say to the cognitive psychologists, well, you leave a rat buried in thought, when he's trying to make a decision about something. I can explain that so-called higher mental processes with these little twitches. Now, you might ask yourself, because I said that a skill like playing the piano is associated with learning lots of little connections, right? A piece of music. Well, what keeps all this stuff going? What ties all these little strings, all these little muscular movements together? And what we call like a chain of behavior. According to Guthrie, it involves some things called, let's have a demonstration. Do you mind standing up? I won't embarrass you too much. Do you mind standing up? I want to have a little demonstration, and you're the guinea pig. but I won't embarrass you. I won't embarrass you. Okay. Right. Okay, now what I want you to do is hold your right arm out to the side, but you're going to have to get away from the podium here. Yeah, just hold your arm out like that, straight out to the side, okay? Yeah, got it? Now I want you to close your eyes. No, I want you to close your eyes. Now what I want you to do is take your left hand and I want you to touch your right hand while your eyes are closed. Go ahead. Very good. Open your eyes. How'd you do that? Your eyes were closed. How'd you know where your right hand was? Your eyes were closed. Huh? You did move it, but how did you know where to go? Why weren't you standing there like this? You know where it is. How did you know where it was? Your eyes were closed. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We want to reward her for coming up here and facing the class. You knew where your arm was because you know what it felt like, right? What do you mean? You were feeling it?
Well, no, it just felt heavy.
Thank you. There are these sense receptors embedded in the joints and the muscles of your body, and they give rise to what we call internal perception or proprioception. Internal perception, proprioception. And these sense receptor cells in there tell you where your body parts are in space. So, for example, when my arm's out here, I know my arm's out there, and I don't have to see it. Because the sense receptor cells embedded in the joints and the tendons in my body here are sending signals to my brain telling it where it is because I can feel it. This whole area of research having to do with proprioception gave rise to the academic discipline known as gym class. No, kinesiology. Kinesiology. Kinesiology is body position sense. It's knowing where your body position are. So the kinesiology department is very big on that kind of stuff. Because, for example, if you're going to play tennis and you want to be a pro, you need to know exactly what it feels like to hit the perfect serve. And I think that athletic professional athletes knew what it felt like. Same thing with the perfect serve and all that kind of stuff. So Guthrie said that what chains a lot of these behaviors together is this proprioceptive stimulation. And I think they discussed it in a couple of pages into this thing. Movement-produced stimulus. That's what you need to know about. Movement-produced stimulus. Please tell me that you take it out of there. 194. Is that 194? Very good. Yes, the bottom of 194, movement-produced stimulus. You need to know that, and that's just what I got through talking about. This proprioceptive stimulant. So that you know what that feels like, and that's a response that's connected to the next stimulus, which is connected to the next response, and so on and so forth. We're not talking any kind of reinforcement or punishment or anything. It's just this feels like that, this feels like that, and you just keep going. Because that's what you did the last time you were in that situation. Well, can we think of some real-life examples that are based on, we'll finish up with that, any real-life examples that are based on Guthrie's theory of learning? Real-life examples where his ideas can be seen, hit you right in the face. Can you think of any? I could think of one. It's called a fire drill. Okay, when you hear this bell, stand up in single file, go through the door, and walk calmly out the door.